In the bustling corridors of Terminal A, Lena Carter, a formidable force in the corporate world, strides with purpose, unaware that her next flight will challenge more than just her patience. As she settles into her first-class seat, a seemingly routine journey spirals into a confrontation that exposes deep-seated biases and tests the very fabric of her principles. With tensions rising and assumptions laid bare, the question remains: how will Lena turn this moment of prejudice into a catalyst for change? Let's stick around to find out. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. If you enjoy this tale, don't forget to subscribe. The gentle hum of the airport terminal faded into white noise as Lena Carter navigated the pristine corridors of Terminal A. Her carry-on wheeled silently behind her on the perfectly maintained floors, the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished tiles. Lena, a woman of quiet determination, had spent the better part of 2 decades breaking barriers in the corporate world, particularly in the airline industry. Dressed in a well-fitted pair of dark jeans, a cream cashmere sweater, and comfortable leather loafers, Lena prioritized comfort over ostentation. Her attire often surprised those who knew of her considerable influence in the industry. At 45, Lena carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of navigating boardrooms where she was often the only black woman present. Her natural hair was styled in neat shoulder-length twists, and her face, free of makeup save for a touch of lip gloss, bore the subtle signs of someone who had earned every ounce of her success through relentless dedication and unwavering principles. As she approached the first-class lounge, Lena found herself reflecting on the week's meetings. They had been intense, filled with discussions about implementing new diversity initiatives across the airline's global operations. As a major investor, Lena had pushed for comprehensive changes in hiring practices, customer service training, and leadership development programs. She had presented compelling data showing how diversity initiatives had improved performance metrics across other major corporations. Yet, she still encountered the familiar resistance, the polite skepticism, the carefully worded concerns about maintaining standards, and the subtle implications that perhaps she was being too aggressive in her approach. Adjusting the strap of her leather messenger bag, Lena felt the weight of her laptop and the stack of proposals she had been reviewing inside. The usual morning bustle of business travelers created a sophisticated ambience in the lounge. The clink of coffee cups, the subtle murmur of conversations in multiple languages, and the rustle of newspapers being folded and unfolded. She chose a quiet corner, ordered a green tea, and checked her phone one last time before boarding would begin. Several emails demanded her attention, including one from the airline's CEO, thanking her for her passionate contribution to the week's discussions. Lena allowed herself a small smile at the choice of words. Passionate was often code for confrontational when applied to women of color in corporate settings. She had learned long ago to read between the lines of such carefully crafted corporate communications. The boarding call for her flight came right on schedule, and Lena gathered her belongings with practiced efficiency. As she approached the gate, she noticed the usual mix of reactions from fellow first-class passengers. The quick double takes, the subtle adjustments of expensive watches, and the slight narrowing of eyes that suggested calculations being made about her presence among them. She had grown accustomed to these micro-expressions over the years and had learned to catalog them without letting them disturb her inner peace. Walking down the jet bridge, Lena felt the familiar transition from the controlled chaos of the terminal to the intimate confines of the aircraft. The first-class cabin welcomed her with its subtle lighting and plush seating, a space she knew intimately not just as a frequent traveler, but as someone whose investment decisions had influenced its very design. She located her seat, 2A, a window seat she had specifically chosen for its extra privacy, and began settling in with the methodical routine she had developed over years of international travel. As she stored her carry-on in the overhead compartment, Lena caught fragments of conversations around her. A silver-haired man in an impeccable suit was discussing merger possibilities with his seatmate. A young tech entrepreneur, betrayed by his casual attire and constant attention to his phone, was apparently in the middle of some sort of cryptocurrency crisis. An elegant older woman was quietly instructing a flight attendant about her dietary restrictions, her accent suggesting old money and older privileges. Lena pulled out her Kindle and a small notebook. She preferred to take handwritten notes during flights, finding that the disconnect from digital devices helped her think more creatively. The notebook contained her thoughts on the week's meetings, including several ideas for improving the airline's approach to customer service across all demographics. She had witnessed too many instances of unconscious bias in the industry and had heard too many stories from friends and colleagues about being made to feel unwelcome or out of place, even in premium cabins they had paid full price to occupy. As she settled into her seat, Lena noticed a few glances from nearby passengers. Some were cursory, the kind of casual observation that naturally occurs in such close quarters, while others lingered a bit longer, carrying that familiar weight of assumption and judgment. A woman across the aisle, dripping in designer labels, made a show of clutching her handbag closer, an action so predictable it almost made Lena laugh. Instead, she focused on adjusting her seat settings and reviewing the safety card, maintaining the calm demeanor that had served her so well in countless similar situations. Just as she was about to lose herself in her Kindle, Lena noticed a flight attendant approaching her seat. The woman's expression, a carefully constructed mask of professional courtesy underlaid with visible skepticism, was one Lena had seen before. She took a deep breath, already anticipating the interaction to come, and reminded herself of why she'd invested in this airline in the first place. Not just for the business opportunity, but for the chance to effect real change from within. Lena Carter settled into her seat, 2A, in the first-class cabin, a space she had come to know well over her years of travel. The cabin was a sanctuary of sorts, offering a brief respite from the demands of her role as a major investor and advocate for diversity in the airline industry. As she adjusted her seat and prepared to dive into her Kindle, she noticed a flight attendant approaching with a purposeful stride. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Anna, wore a practiced smile that seemed to mask a hint of skepticism. Lena had seen this expression before, a carefully constructed facade of professional courtesy that often belied underlying assumptions. Anna stopped at Lena's row, her demeanor polite yet firm. "Good morning, ma'am," Anna began, her voice low enough to maintain discretion but loud enough for nearby passengers to overhear. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Lena handed over her boarding pass with deliberate calm, her movements unhurried despite the flutter of irritation in her chest. She had chosen this seat months ago, specifically for its privacy and the view it offered during takeoff. Anna examined the boarding pass with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for counterfeit currency, her eyes flicking between the document and Lena. "I see there appears to be some confusion," Anna said, her smile remaining fixed in place. "Sometimes our system makes mistakes with seat assignments. I'm sure we can find you a more suitable seat in our economy cabin." The assumption hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Lena felt a familiar tightening in her shoulders, the same tension she had experienced countless times throughout her career, in high-level meetings, at exclusive restaurants, in luxury boutiques. It was the physical manifestation of having to constantly prove that, yes, she did belong in these spaces that people like Anna had been conditioned to view as exclusive territory. "My boarding pass is correct," Lena replied, her voice carrying the same measured tone she used in board meetings when dealing with particularly difficult executives. "I selected this seat specifically." She reached for her phone, ready to pull up her flight confirmation, but Anna had already taken a step back, clutching the boarding pass like a piece of evidence. "If you'll just give me a moment to verify this with our ticketing team," Anna said, her tone suggesting she was being incredibly reasonable in the face of an obvious mistake. "I'm sure we can sort this out quickly." The way she emphasized quickly carried the clear implication that the sooner Lena accepted her proper place, the better it would be for everyone involved. Around them, the first-class cabin had grown quieter, other passengers suddenly very interested in their phones or magazines while simultaneously straining to catch every word of the exchange. Lena took a slow, deep breath, drawing on years of experience in handling such situations. She could feel the weight of her role as an investor pressing against her conscience, urging her to reveal her position and end this immediately. But another part of her, the part that had fought for systemic change throughout her career, wanted to see this play out. This was exactly the kind of situation she'd been discussing in meetings all week. The unconscious biases that permeated customer service, the automatic assumptions made about who belonged where. As Anna disappeared toward the front of the cabin, Lena noticed a young black flight attendant watching from the galley, her expression a complex mixture of recognition and discomfort. Their eyes met briefly, and Lena saw in that moment all the unspoken understanding between them, the shared experience of being questioned, of having to prove their right to occupy certain spaces. The young woman quickly looked away, busying herself with the drink cart, but Lena made a mental note to speak with her later if possible. The luxury-laden woman across the aisle had finally stopped clutching her handbag, but she'd replaced that obvious tell with another, repeatedly glancing between Lena and the empty space where Anna had stood, as if trying to solve a particularly perplexing puzzle. Lena maintained her composure, pulling out her Kindle once more, though she knew she wouldn't be able to focus on reading. Instead, she found herself reflecting on the previous week's meetings. She'd sat in the airline's corporate boardroom, presenting data on customer satisfaction scores broken down by demographic groups. She'd shown clear patterns of disparity in how different passengers were treated, backed by both quantitative metrics and qualitative feedback. Some board members had been receptive, others defensive, but all had agreed that changes were needed, at least in principle. Now, mere days later, she was experiencing firsthand the very issues she'd been discussing. The irony wasn't lost on Lena that she'd specifically invested in this airline because of its potential for improvement. She'd seen in its corporate structure and market position the perfect opportunity to implement meaningful change from within. The airline's routes served diverse communities, its price points were becoming more accessible, and its leadership had shown just enough willingness to listen to make her believe real progress was possible. But moments like this reminded her how much work still needed to be done. Through the window, Lena could see the ground crew finishing their preparations, the choreography of airport operations playing out against the backdrop of a brightening morning sky. She checked her watch. They were already cutting into the scheduled departure time. Around her, other passengers were beginning to show signs of impatience, checking their own watches and phones with increasing frequency. Lena could sense their growing frustration, though she suspected it had less to do with concern for her dignity and more to do with their own delayed travel plans. The sound of approaching footsteps drew her attention back to the aisle. Anna had returned, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her walked a man in a dark suit with a supervisor's badge, his expression carefully neutral as they approached Lena's seat. She straightened slightly, recognizing that the situation was about to escalate into something more official. The supervisor's presence marked a turning point, either toward resolution or toward a more serious confrontation. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin shifted dramatically as David Mitchell, the supervisor, stood beside Maya, his expression a mix of embarrassment and urgency. The realization of who she was had transformed the dynamic of the situation, and the tension that had once filled the air was now replaced by a palpable sense of anticipation. "Ma'am, I understand there seems to be some confusion about your seating assignment," David began, his voice steady but lacking its earlier authority. "Due to what appears to be an overbooking situation in first class, we may need to make some adjustments to accommodate all of our premium passengers." Maya felt a familiar surge of indignation rise within her, but she channeled it into a calm observation of the scene unfolding around her. The young black flight attendant, Jasmine, had positioned herself where she could witness the interaction while pretending to organize the galley. Other passengers had abandoned any pretense of disinterest, their attention now openly fixed on the developing situation. The tech entrepreneur had even removed his wireless earbuds, his cryptocurrency crisis temporarily forgotten. "I'm fully entitled to this seat," Maya responded, her voice carrying the quiet authority she had developed over years of boardroom negotiations. "I selected it months ago, and I fly this route frequently." She maintained direct eye contact with David, noting how he shifted slightly under her steady gaze. "Perhaps we could check the passenger manifest more thoroughly," she suggested, her tone firm yet composed. The tension in the cabin had become almost tangible, the recycled air growing thicker with each passing moment, heavy with unspoken accusations and assumptions. Through the window, Maya could see the last pieces of luggage being loaded into the cargo hold, a reminder that the flight's scheduled departure time was slipping away with each minute of this confrontation. The luxury-laden woman across the aisle had finally found her voice. "Surely there's been some mistake," she interjected. Her words directed at David, but her eyes flicking between him and Maya. "We all want to depart on time." The woman's attempt at diplomacy barely masked her implied suggestion about who should be the one to move. Maya absorbed the comment without visible reaction, though she noted how quickly others in the cabin nodded in agreement with the woman's statement. She recognized this familiar dynamic, how quickly individual discomfort could transform into collective pressure, all while maintaining a veneer of politeness and reason. Before the silver-haired businessman could add his own thoughts to the situation, Maya made a decision. She had observed enough and gathered sufficient evidence of exactly the kind of systemic issues she had been discussing in the boardroom all week. Now it was time to shift the dynamic. She reached into her messenger bag and retrieved her business card holder, a subtle piece of leather crafted by a small black-owned business she had been proud to support. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice taking on the tone she reserved for pivotal moments in negotiations, "I suggest you look up my name in the airline's investor database, Maya Brooks." She didn't elaborate further. The simple statement hung in the air, its implications slowly registering on the faces of those around her. David's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight widening of the eyes, a minimal tightening of his jaw. Susan, still standing slightly behind him, had gone completely still. The cabin's atmosphere changed as other passengers tried to process this new information, their expressions cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning realization. The young black flight attendant in the galley had stopped pretending to be busy, her face showing a complex mixture of emotions: pride, vindication, and something that looked like hope. Maya caught her eye again, offering a subtle nod of acknowledgement. This moment wasn't just about defending her own right to occupy this space. It was about all the others who faced similar challenges without having the power to push back. David pulled out his tablet, his fingers moving across the screen with newly urgent precision. The silence in the cabin grew heavier as he accessed the database, the quiet hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit providing a subtle soundtrack to the moment. Maya used the pause to observe the reactions around her, the way the luxury-laden woman had suddenly found her magazine intensely fascinating, how the tech entrepreneur was trying to catch glimpses of David's tablet screen, and the way Susan's professional mask had begun to show cracks of uncertainty. Through the window, Maya could see that the ground crew had completed their work. The morning sun had risen higher, casting long shadows across the tarmac and highlighting the airline's logo on nearby aircraft, the very same logo that appeared on documents she had been reviewing and signing all week. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. How the very brand she was helping to shape and improve was simultaneously demonstrating exactly why such improvement was necessary. Maya maintained her composed demeanor, but her mind was already moving forward, analyzing how this incident could be transformed into a teaching moment, a catalyst for the very changes she had been advocating. She thought about the training programs she had proposed, the policy modifications she had suggested, and how this experience would provide perfect real-world evidence of their necessity. The sound of David's sharp intake of breath brought her attention back to the immediate situation. He had found her name in the database, and judging by his expression, he had discovered exactly who she was. Not just a major investor, but one of the driving forces behind the airline's recent progressive initiatives. The tablet in his hand seemed to have become suddenly heavy as he looked up, his face displaying a complicated mixture of embarrassment, realization, and professional panic. "M. Brooks," he began, his voice having lost its earlier authoritative edge. "I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience." The words came out stilted, as if he were suddenly hyper-aware of each syllable. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding." The word misunderstanding hung in the air, inadequate and hollow, failing to capture the true nature of what had transpired. Maya noticed how he carefully avoided using more accurate terms like prejudice or bias, even as those very concepts were clearly at the forefront of everyone's minds. Susan stepped forward, her professional training warring with her obvious discomfort. "I apologize for my assumption," she managed, each word careful and measured as she worked through her own thought process. "I should have verified your status more thoroughly before suggesting any changes to your seating arrangement." The formal language of her apology couldn't quite mask the tremor in her voice or the flush that had crept up her neck to color her cheeks. Through the window, Maya could see other aircraft taxiing past, their movements a reminder of the delayed departure time. Yet somehow, the usual tension that accompanied flight delays was absent from the cabin. Instead, the air was thick with a different kind of pressure, the uncomfortable awareness of prejudices exposed and privileges questioned. The silver-haired businessman who had been so eager to involve himself earlier now seemed intensely interested in the safety card in his seat pocket, studying its familiar diagrams as if they contained the secrets of the universe. The elegant older woman with the dietary restrictions had removed her reading glasses entirely, her expression suggesting she was witnessing something far more significant than a simple case of mistaken identity. Maya could hear David's continued murmured explanations to Susan about her role in the company. Snippets about corporate initiatives, board meetings, and financial contributions drifting through the cabin. Each revealed detail seemed to make Susan's professional mask crack a little more, her carefully maintained composure crumbling under the weight of understanding exactly whose experience she had just marred. The young black flight attendant in the galley had begun preparing the drink service with renewed energy, her movements carrying a subtle but unmistakable air of satisfaction. Maya recognized in her expression the vicarious victory of seeing someone in power finally experience the consequences of their assumptions, a feeling she'd witnessed countless times throughout her career when younger colleagues watched her challenge the status quo. The morning sun had shifted again, its rays now creating different patterns across the cabin floor. Maya watched the play of light and shadow, thinking about how this incident would ripple through the company. She could already imagine the urgent meetings that would be called, the hasty reviews of training protocols, and the uncomfortable conversations about implicit bias that would follow. Susan's voice broke through Maya's thoughts, softer now and stripped of its earlier condescension. "Is there anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable, Ms. Brooks?" The question carried the weight of desperate hope for redemption, a desire to somehow make right what had gone so terribly wrong. Maya noted how Susan's entire demeanor had transformed, the earlier authority replaced by a genuine, if uncomfortable, awareness of her own biases. The air in the cabin felt different now, charged with the potential for change. Maya could sense that this moment would extend far beyond this flight, beyond this airline, perhaps even beyond the industry itself. She had already begun mentally composing the email she would send to the board, not to complain about her treatment but to use this incident as a concrete example of why the changes she'd been advocating were so desperately needed. The first-class cabin had fallen into a contemplative silence as David Mitchell, the supervisor, processed the full implications of the situation. The revelation of Maya Brooks' identity had shifted the power dynamics in the cabin, leaving a palpable tension in its wake. The passengers, who had been so quick to judge, now sat in awkward silence, their earlier assumptions laid bare. David, still holding his tablet, seemed to struggle with the weight of the information it contained. The database entry not only confirmed Maya as a major investor, but detailed her pivotal role in the airline's recent diversity initiatives. Each piece of information added another layer of complexity to his understanding of the situation. "M. Brooks," David began again, his voice now devoid of its earlier authority. "I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for this misunderstanding." The word misunderstanding felt inadequate, failing to capture the true nature of what had transpired. Maya noted how he carefully avoided using more accurate terms like prejudice or bias, even as those concepts were clearly at the forefront of everyone's minds. Susan, the flight attendant, stepped forward, her earlier confidence replaced by a genuine, if uncomfortable, awareness of her own biases. "I apologize for my assumption," she managed, each word carefully chosen. "I should have verified your status more thoroughly before suggesting any changes to your seating arrangement." Maya observed the scene with a calm demeanor, recognizing the significance of this moment. It wasn't just about her right to occupy a seat in first class. It was about addressing the systemic issues that allowed such assumptions to persist. She had spent years advocating for change, and now she had a real-world example to illustrate the necessity of her efforts. The young black flight attendant, Jasmine, had moved closer, her presence adding another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. Maya caught her eye and offered a subtle nod, acknowledging the shared understanding between them. This moment wasn't just about Maya. It was about all the others who faced similar challenges without the power to push back. Maya took a deep breath, preparing to address both David and Susan. "This isn't just about a seating mistake," she began, her voice steady and measured. "It's about the assumptions we make and the biases we carry, often unconsciously. I appreciate your apologies, but I hope we can use this as an opportunity to learn and improve." David nodded, his earlier discomfort giving way to a genuine desire to understand and rectify the situation. "Absolutely, Ms. Brooks. We are committed to making changes and ensuring that all our passengers feel welcome and respected." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out the diversity training proposals she had presented to the board. "These initiatives aren't just about checking boxes or meeting quotas," she explained, spreading the documents across her tray table. "They're about transforming how we see and interact with each other, about questioning the unconscious biases that shape our initial reactions." Susan and David listened intently, their earlier defensiveness replaced by a willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue. Jasmine, too, leaned in, her interest evident as she absorbed every word. "I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we can improve," Maya continued, directing the conversation toward solutions rather than dwelling on the problem. "You're on the front lines of customer interaction. What changes would help you and your colleagues avoid similar situations in the future?" Susan was the first to respond, her initial hesitation giving way to increasingly thoughtful suggestions. She spoke about the need for more comprehensive training, the importance of challenging ingrained assumptions, and the creation of support systems for staff to discuss and learn from these kinds of incidents. David added his own insights about systemic changes needed at the supervisory level. His earlier discomfort transformed into professional engagement with the challenge at hand. Jasmine, encouraged by Maya's invitation, offered her perspective, highlighting the importance of listening to diverse voices within the organization. The conversation evolved into a genuine exchange of ideas and experiences, each participant contributing to a broader understanding of how to create meaningful change. Maya guided the discussion with the skill of an experienced leader, ensuring that this difficult moment was transformed into an opportunity for growth and understanding. As the plane continued its journey, the morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating not just the cabin but the path forward toward more inclusive and equitable service for all passengers. The story of what happened on that flight began circulating through the airline's corporate channels before Maya's plane had even touched down. It started as whispered conversations between flight crew members, then spread through break rooms and office corridors, each retelling adding layers of significance to the encounter. By the time Maya returned to her office the following week, the incident had evolved from a simple case of mistaken assumptions into a catalyst for institutional change. The airline's internal communication system buzzed with urgent messages. Senior management called emergency meetings to discuss the implications of having subjected a board member and major investor to the very treatment she had been warning them about. But Maya wasn't interested in corporate damage control or personal apologies. Instead, she seized the momentum created by the incident, transforming it into a powerful argument for implementing the changes she had proposed. Word of the incident eventually reached industry publications, first appearing as a brief mention in an aviation blog, then expanding into fuller coverage by major media outlets. The story resonated because it highlighted a universal truth, that prejudice and bias could persist even in spaces of privilege, affecting even those who held positions of power. Maya's response to the situation, characterized by grace and a focus on systemic improvement rather than individual blame, drew particular attention. Susan's role in the story took an unexpected turn. Rather than face punishment or dismissal, she became an advocate for change within the company. Her frank acknowledgement of her biases and willing participation in developing new training protocols transformed her from a potential cautionary tale into an example of how awareness could lead to meaningful growth. In company meetings, she began sharing her experience openly, helping other staff members recognize and challenge their own unconscious assumptions. The young flight attendant, Jasmine, found herself increasingly involved in the airline's transformation. Her perspective, shaped by years of observing similar interactions from the margins, proved invaluable in developing new service protocols. Maya made sure Jasmine's voice was heard in key meetings, recognizing that meaningful change required input from all levels of the organization, especially from those who had long witnessed the problems firsthand. David's role evolved as well. His experience during the incident prompted him to reassess his approach to supervision and conflict resolution. He became an unexpected champion for the new training programs, using his position to ensure that frontline managers received comprehensive education about bias and inclusion. His transformation from reluctant participant to active advocate illustrated the ripple effects of Maya's measured response to the situation. The airline's board, faced with undeniable evidence of the issues Maya had been highlighting, fast-tracked the implementation of her proposed changes. The training programs she had designed were no longer seen as optional additions to standard protocol, but as essential components of the company's operational strategy. The incident had transformed abstract discussions about diversity and inclusion into concrete imperatives for change. Media coverage of the story sparked broader conversations within the aviation industry. Other airlines began examining their own practices and protocols, recognizing that they likely harbored similar issues. Industry conferences added sessions about bias in customer service, and Maya found herself increasingly in demand as a speaker and consultant. Her experience became a case study in how to transform negative incidents into opportunities for institutional growth. The incident's impact extended beyond the corporate world. Civil rights organizations cited it as an example of how bias persisted in supposedly elite spaces, while educational institutions incorporated it into their business ethics curricula. Maya's response, choosing education over punishment, systemic change over individual blame, became a model for addressing similar situations across various industries. Over time, the airline's culture began to shift. New employees learned about the incident during their orientation, not as a cautionary tale about what not to do, but as an example of how confronting uncomfortable truths could lead to positive change. The company's customer satisfaction scores showed marked improvement, particularly among minority passengers, as staff at all levels became more conscious of their interactions and assumptions. A year after the incident, Maya sat in the same first-class cabin, in the same seat, 2A. This time, the flight crew's warm welcome carried no hint of skepticism or doubt. As she settled in for the flight, she noticed a young black woman being shown to her first-class seat by a smiling Susan. The interaction was natural, respectful, free of the assumptions that had colored similar moments in the past. Maya smiled, recognizing that while individual incidents might fade from memory, their impact could create lasting change, transforming not just policies and procedures but the very culture that had made them necessary in the first place. The morning sun streamed through the window just as it had that fateful day, but now it illuminated a different reality. One where belonging wasn't determined by appearances, where assumptions were challenged before they became actions, and where dignity was offered freely rather than earned through credentials. Maya opened her laptop, ready to work on her next initiative, knowing that while significant progress had been made, the journey toward true equality and inclusion was ongoing, requiring constant vigilance, courage, and commitment to change. The story of Maya Brooks' encounter on the flight had spread rapidly through the airline's corporate channels, igniting a series of urgent meetings and discussions. By the time Maya returned to her office, the incident had already become a catalyst for significant institutional change. The airline's leadership, faced with undeniable evidence of the issues Maya had been highlighting, moved swiftly to implement the changes she had proposed. Maya sat in her office, surrounded by the familiar hum of activity, as her team worked diligently on the diversity initiatives she had championed. The incident on the flight had provided the perfect real-world example of why these changes were necessary, and Maya was determined to seize the momentum. The airline's internal communication system buzzed with messages, each one a testament to the urgency with which the company was addressing the situation. Senior management had called emergency meetings to discuss the implications of having subjected a board member and major investor to the very treatment she had been warning them about. But Maya wasn't interested in corporate damage control or personal apologies. Instead, She focused on transforming the incident into a powerful argument for implementing the changes she had long advocated. In the days following the flight, Maya worked closely with the airline's leadership to fast-track the implementation of her proposed changes. The training programs she had designed were no longer seen as optional additions to standard protocol, but as essential components of the company's operational strategy. The incident had transformed abstract discussions about diversity and inclusion into concrete imperatives for change. Maya's response to the situation, characterized by grace and a focus on systemic improvement rather than individual blame, drew particular attention. Her approach had turned what could have been a simple case of mistaken assumptions into a catalyst for institutional change. The airline's board, faced with undeniable evidence of the issues Maya had been highlighting, moved swiftly to implement the changes she had proposed. Susan, the flight attendant who had initially questioned Maya's presence in first class, took an unexpected turn in the story. Rather than face punishment or dismissal, she became an advocate for change within the company. Her frank acknowledgement of her biases and willing participation in developing new training protocols transformed her from a potential cautionary tale into an example of how awareness could lead to meaningful growth. In company meetings, Susan began sharing her experience openly, helping other staff members recognize and challenge their own unconscious assumptions. Her transformation from a reluctant participant to an active advocate illustrated the ripple effects of Maya's measured response to the situation. Jasmine, the young black flight attendant who had witnessed the entire scene, found herself increasingly involved in the airline's transformation. Her perspective, shaped by years of observing similar interactions from the margins, proved invaluable in developing new service protocols. Maya made sure Jasmine's voice was heard in key meetings, recognizing that meaningful change required input from all levels of the organization, especially from those who had long witnessed the problems firsthand. David, the supervisor who had initially approached Maya with skepticism, also experienced a transformation. His experience during the incident prompted him to reassess his approach to supervision and conflict resolution. He became an unexpected champion for the new training programs, using his position to ensure that frontline managers received comprehensive education about bias and inclusion. The airline's culture began to shift as a result of these changes. New employees learned about the incident during their orientation, not as a cautionary tale about what not to do, but as an example of how confronting uncomfortable truths could lead to positive change. The company's customer satisfaction scores showed marked improvement, particularly among minority passengers, as staff at all levels became more conscious of their interactions and assumptions. Maya's experience became a case study in how to transform negative incidents into opportunities for institutional growth. Her response, choosing education over punishment, systemic change over individual blame, became a model for addressing similar situations across various industries. As the airline continued to evolve, Maya remained committed to her mission of creating meaningful change. She knew that while significant progress had been made, the journey toward true equality and inclusion was ongoing, requiring constant vigilance, courage, and commitment to change. As the weeks turned into months, the impact of Maya Brooks' experience on that fateful flight continued to resonate throughout the airline and the broader industry. The changes initiated in the wake of the incident were not merely superficial adjustments. They represented a fundamental shift in how the airline approached diversity, equity, and inclusion. Maya found herself increasingly in demand as a speaker at industry conferences and corporate training sessions. Her story had become a powerful example of how one moment of confrontation could lead to systemic change. She was invited to share her insights on panels discussing the importance of representation in leadership and the necessity of confronting unconscious bias in customer service. At one such conference, Maya stood before a packed audience of industry professionals, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and purpose. The room was filled with faces eager to learn, to understand, and to change. As she began her presentation, she recounted her experience on the flight, detailing the assumptions made about her based solely on her appearance. "I want you to understand," she said, her voice steady and clear, "that this isn't just about one incident. It's about the countless individuals who have faced similar situations without the platform to speak out. It's about the systemic biases that exist in our industry and how we can work together to dismantle them." The audience listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others taking notes. Maya shared the steps the airline had taken since the incident. The comprehensive training programs that had been implemented, the new policies aimed at fostering an inclusive environment, and the ongoing dialogues that encouraged employees to confront their biases. As she spoke, she could see the impact of her words. Some attendees were visibly moved, their expressions reflecting a mix of shame and determination. Others were inspired, their eyes lighting up with the realization that they, too, could be agents of change within their organizations. After her presentation, Maya was approached by a young woman named Rachel, a flight attendant from a competing airline. "Thank you for sharing your story," Rachel said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've experienced similar situations, and it's so encouraging to see someone like you advocating for change. I want to bring these ideas back to my team." Maya smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment wash over her. "It starts with conversations like this," she replied. "You have the power to influence your colleagues and create a culture of inclusivity. Don't underestimate your voice." As the conference continued, Maya engaged in discussions with other industry leaders, sharing ideas and strategies for implementing meaningful change. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her experience was not just a personal journey, but a collective movement toward a more equitable future. Back at the airline, the changes Maya had championed were taking root. Susan, the flight attendant who had initially questioned Maya's presence, had become a passionate advocate for the new training programs. She led workshops for her colleagues, sharing her own journey of self-discovery and the importance of recognizing and challenging biases. Jasmine, the young black flight attendant who had witnessed the incident, was now a key player in the airline's diversity initiatives. Her insights and experiences were invaluable in shaping the training materials, ensuring that they resonated with employees at all levels. Maya had made it a point to elevate Jasmine's voice, recognizing that her perspective was crucial in creating a truly inclusive environment. David, the supervisor who had initially approached Maya with skepticism, had transformed into a dedicated champion for the new policies. He worked closely with the training department to ensure that all staff received comprehensive education on bias and inclusion. His commitment to change was evident in the way he engaged with employees, fostering an environment where open dialogue was encouraged. As the airline continued to evolve, Maya remained committed to her mission of creating meaningful change. She knew that while significant progress had been made, the journey toward true equality and inclusion was ongoing, requiring constant vigilance, courage, and commitment to change. Months later, Maya found herself back in the first-class cabin, this time as a passenger on a flight to a major industry conference. The atmosphere was different. The cabin buzzed with a sense of camaraderie and respect among the crew and passengers alike. As she settled into her seat, she noticed the flight attendants interacting with passengers in a way that felt warm and genuine, free from the assumptions that had once clouded such interactions. As the flight took off, Maya reflected on how far the airline had come since that pivotal day. The training programs had not only improved customer service but had also fostered a culture of accountability and awareness among employees. The airline's customer satisfaction scores had soared, particularly among minority passengers, a testament to the positive changes taking root. During the flight, Maya was approached by Jasmine, who had been promoted to a lead role in the airline's diversity initiatives. "I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done," Jasmine said, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Your support has made a huge difference for me and for so many others." Maya smiled, feeling a sense of pride in the progress they had made together. "You've been instrumental in this change, Jasmine. Your voice matters, and I'm so glad to see you taking the lead." As they chatted, Maya noticed a group of passengers nearby engaged in a lively discussion about the airline's recent initiatives. They were sharing their positive experiences, praising the staff for their attentiveness and the inclusive atmosphere that had been cultivated. It was a stark contrast to the environment she had encountered on that fateful flight. Later in the flight, as the cabin crew prepared for the meal service, Maya observed Susan interacting with passengers, her demeanor warm and welcoming. The earlier tension that had characterized their first encounter had been replaced by genuine engagement. Maya felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that Susan had embraced the changes and was actively contributing to a more inclusive environment. As the flight continued, Maya took a moment to reflect on her journey. She had faced challenges and resistance, but she had also witnessed the power of advocacy and the impact of one person's voice. The experience had not only transformed the airline but had also inspired her to continue fighting for change in other areas of her life. Upon landing, Maya disembarked with a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to carry the lessons learned from her experience into her future endeavors, advocating for diversity and inclusion in every space she occupied. The journey toward equality was ongoing, but she felt empowered to be a part of that change. As she walked through the terminal, Maya couldn't help but smile at the thought of the ripple effect her experience had created. She had turned a moment of confrontation into a movement for change, and she was excited to see where that journey would lead next.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep bringing you the best stories.